Deepesh, you there?
Yeah, Jiva, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for Deepesh. Thanks for joining. Guys, let's welcome Deepesh. As I said, he's in Microsoft Business Application MVP, and his session for today is going to be UI Flows Power. Deepesh Somani is known for his active contribution in the community, and he also written 4 books. Am I right? Yeah,
Three,
4 books.
three is
Yeah,
it?
3 books.
Three is it,
4 is in
Jiva?
the progress, I think. Okay. Welcome, Deepesh. Please, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiva, for your introduction. So I hope everybody benefited from the wonderful sessions we all have been having since the morning. It has been a lot to digest, right? So thank you, Jiva, for handing it over. Thank you, Kuldeep, for your wonderful session on project service automation, which is going to be further changed to PSA as we move, right? Let me know, Jiva, if you can confirm to me if the screen is now visible, audio is
Yes.
also fine.
Yeah, all good. All good. You can go ahead.
All right.
Guys, kindly post your questions in the chat as we did for previous sessions. Deepesh will address. Deepesh, you would like to want to address the questions in between or at the end of the session?
Yeah, so we'll try to keep it interactive. If you feel, Jiva, let me know every 10 to 15 minutes, right? If we really have time. I would want to definitely give 10 to 15 minutes at the end to go through any of the questions that our audience might have, right? But if
Perfect.
there is really something about there, definitely I would want to interact and feel free everybody to unmute yourself, and some interactions might be good for us to understand what the capabilities of UI flow are and how does it really help. What are the situations we have been facing for years altogether and how this really helps. All right, so having said that, I'll just move over to my next slide. I'm going to be our RPA buddy for today. And what is RPA? Is robotic process automation. I've been a Microsoft certified trainer. Full time, my role includes managing Power Platform as well as Dynamics 365 customer engagement practice. I've been MVP since 2015. If you want to follow me on any of the links, if you want to utilize the books, go ahead. Feel free to reach out. I'm active on most social media channels. So before going into that, let's first understand why Microsoft Power Automate. Because before we go into one of the categories of Power Automate, we need to understand what Microsoft Power Automate is all about, right? And I'm going to talk more from the perspective of how this can be of use to business, right? Because that's where it really creates value. So
Deepesh,
just
can you go back to the previous slide if you don't mind? Sorry.
no
Just
problem. What happened?
yeah. Just okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Anything wrong, Jiva?
No, we are good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so before I go ahead and start talking about UI flows or robotic process automation, we have to first realize and understand the value of the entire ecosystem at play. Because until we realize that, neither my demonstration, neither the actual use case and impact and how customers are trying to utilize it is going to be of value to us. So just to go through that, just by if some of you can unmute yourself and know, tell me how many of you have been utilizing Power Automate of late for your customers.
Yeah, I'm myself is now Manas, so I'm utilizing in one of my project currently.
Okay.
Me too, Prashant.
This is
And
Sampada. I'm also using Power Automate.
right.
I just used yesterday, boss.
Okay.
Okay, I
So
just posted. Sorry, Deepesh. I just posted the forms link for the feedback, guys. So if you whoever missed the QR code is there. I can see many of you asking the link. Thanks. Sorry, Deepesh. Yeah, you can continue.
okay. So just to continue that conversation and the interaction, why do we like to utilize Microsoft Power Automate for our customers? So rather than me going through a set of deck, I know Power Automate is more or less going to continue to be the mainstream technology, or what I call it is workflow to everything, right? That's my definition of Power Automate, workflow to everything. So just some examples of why do you sense and why you are utilizing it on a day-to-day basis at this point.
So I can give you one scenario. In my client business, they are approving a lot of purchase orders and requisitions, and most of the management doesn't want to go to the finance and operation. They just want to approve it through the email. They just want to see the content. What is this request came from which department, and they just would
Uh-huh.
like to give a response through the email only. So just we configured this whole workflow procedure through this Power Automate, and then we are getting the response in the email only.
Right. Any other examples before I move forward? Thanks for your example.
Hi Dipesh, this is Shashi here. So
Hi,
we have
Shashi.
implemented Power Automate for one of our requirement. So it was like we used to generate document templates and convert into PDF. So before, prior to Power Automate introduced by Microsoft, we were using a console batch job which used to run every 2 hours and generate those documents into PDF. So after Power Automate was introduced, we used the OneDrive connector to convert it into PDF without much coding skills. And it was like it was also like we don't have to go for a server to run schedule that batch job. And so to implement that, we come up with this Microsoft Automate, and recently we enhanced that for also digital signature using the SignHost API.
Great examples. Thanks for
Two
sharing
for
this.
me. I've got two examples. So, one where my client, they didn't have much time or they didn't have much money to pay. So what they wanted was that to populate a lookup from a text field, and if they wanted a technical person or a plugin to be deployed or things like that, it would have taken much more time. But Power Automate was able to do that probably in like 25 minutes. And that was first. And second one was one of the clients they were using my ob accounting app, which is like on your desktop, like on premise kind of thing. And they wanted to create invoices and customer whenever it happens in Dynamics 365 CE. So that's when they used UI flows in the second example. First one was just flow.
Right, that's kind of great examples again, Prashant. So again, moving into my next slide, right? That's what more or less my next slide is going to talk about. It is totally about people and automation, right? So we have always had this different kinds of heterogeneous applications sitting in the cloud, sitting in on-prem, where we wanted to create a workflow for the entire organization. So when we see the silos that used to exist before Power Automate came together, or formerly we used to call it Microsoft Flow, and when this Power App Platform ecosystem came together, we would be investing a lot of time and technical time. And that technical time used to convert into definitely implementation cost in both terms of time and money for the organization. In comes Power Automate, which empowers people to automate and improve those efficiencies. And you don't need to be always having the technical ability to be doing it, right? You can be a power user of the application or power user of the business. All you need to know more or less is what is your business, what you want to automate, and how you can achieve efficiencies. And it should be pretty easy to do, maintain over time. And that's exactly where the workflow to everything from Microsoft, which is Power Automate, came together. I don't think this slide is new to anybody. We have seen it ample number of times. Just want to reiterate, it is not only the Power Automate solution, it is the effect of having analytics, right? With Power Apps, you can act. With Power Automate, you can really utilize those workflows. And then there are endless amount of things that are coming in. Like we have tons of data connectors as of now. I think if I'm not wrong on the number, almost close to 320 connectors when I last checked. You have AI Builder, and Ruhi in the next session is going to talk about that. You of course have common data service. You have things like Power Virtual Agents, Power Portals. Later in the day, if you are staying with us till end of the day, you will see Rayash and Ritika both talking about Power Automate and Power App Portal. So things like that coming in, and it's really that broader ecosystem. And where does Power Automate plays its part? So Power Automate is basically designed for everyone. You can be an end user. So let's say I'm that guy who is trying to automate that quotation process without actually going into each record on a particular application, may it be a model-driven app, may it be a sales application, may it be some other application and sitting in SharePoint or a non-Microsoft system. I'm that end user. I know what I need to achieve, and it gives me that flexibility of doing approvals over email without the need to actually keep going into my different applications. I can be an experienced developers. A lot of people in this group are experienced devs, right? We started as those developers, and we want to upskill and maintain something which is a low code or no code way. And you can also be a IT admin, right? So there are a lot of administrators out there traditionally who have been dependent on different external consultants, or they have been dependent on people with those right technical skills to do their automation. This kind of automation service is what Power Automate offers. It offers us automation of scale. So Jiva just shared an example, right? Like, sorry, Jiva, I'm taking your example on the fly, and he recently used Power Automate. So can I
Please,
use your
please.
use case what you utilized it for
Yeah,
an
yeah, please,
example on?
please. Go
So
ahead.
he had close to few hundred records which were required to be migrated from SharePoint, and we need to take it into a CDS database, I believe, right? So they have utilized Power Automate to do that relatively smaller migration. Traditionally, I would be looking for tools like exercise-based tools. I will have to take a staging, and then I will be using something like a Kingsway Soft or a Scribe, or maybe I'll be building my own packages or a console application to move all this data around. Investment of time, right? And tomorrow, if I want to make change, another investment of time. Here you see in this workload, you get the automation of scale. You can efficiently scale your automation across your organization. Now, seamlessly secure integration. So it is not only like when I create workflow for my entire organization in the cloud, it needs to be secure, right? It has to be compliant. It has to be having the skilled IT resources for more complex and strategic works, right? My more skilled IT resources should be able to focus on other things and not this day-to-day security maintenance of this workflow engine. Then it also accelerates productivity. Of course, we already saw in these examples, which all the great folks from the community already shared, some of them, of course, being active users of this particular framework. Yeah, you accelerate productivity. How is that? So typically, if I just take that example, I would have taken a week at least, being a very good developer, to be writing such a small level automation for some limited set of data types, mapping them and around. With Power Automate, you can still achieve it in few hours or days, right? Rather than going for those weeks. And
And
then,
that includes attachments from the
right.
other another library to Dynamics attachments.
Right. And anybody who has been doing dynamics for even 2, 3 years knows how easy, and I'm saying it like in a sarcastic way, how easy it is to move attachments on the go, right? So it is not that easy. So those kind of places which are a kind of you know, where traditionally will spend a lot of time, you are easily able to get it going, right? So basically, you are able to get those disruptive low calories frozen grapefruit going, right? So if I take that example, right, your low hanging fruit you can easily automate. Then intelligent automation. Why do I talk about AI before I even go into the talk of a UI flow? So I will leave it to Ruhi in her next session, but definitely you want to apply AI on top of whatever workflow engines that you're running, whatever different heterogeneous integrations you're running, your CDS, and then you want to scale accordingly, right? So scaling the automation efficiently, how is that achieved? You have varieties of pre-built templates, and I'm not talking few hundred. There are few at this stage. There are at least more than 1,000 there, close to 1,500 templates, which you can utilize. So that means that you don't even need to design those steps or flows. You have your source, destination, and steps already there, and it makes it even more easier for you to configure your automations. Then there are 300 plus connectors at this stage. Some of them are premium, yeah. Others are available as is, but there are variety of offerings. So one random example that I always try to quote whenever I'm talking about Power Platform, there's even a connector to Salesforce, which is traditionally been competition, right? But yes, you can take Salesforce data and you can consume a Oracle DB in. We got introduced to SAP connectors recently, a month or so back. It integrates relatively lot easier with the Microsoft extended ecosystem. For those organizations and customers who are trying to make one standard workflow engine for their business, running their business and their operations, it gives them one standard ecosystem. And that story is really coming together with Azure, Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, and then I will add to it Power Platform, right? That story is really coming together. On premises or in cloud, with gateways, there is already the introduction to the ability for Power Platform to integrate with your on-premise data. So today, in my RP or UI flow example, I'm going to tell you that there is a gateway installed in my local machine, right, which is achieving the entire automation for us. Again, I'm not going to spend much time on this particular slide, but when you are integrating, you want it to be enterprise grade in terms of governance, and you want it to be secure, compliant, identity management. You want your access secure. It's not like I'm just because I'm getting a no code, low code solution approach, I will let go of my security compliances or my policies in the organization. That is also taken care of. Cloud or on-premise, you have the integrated means for on-premise data as well, and there are ways to do that. How do I accelerate my productivity? There are fewer errors, there's a greater IT efficiencies at play, and I can always reduce manual, repetitive, time-consuming tasks. And that is really going to be my mantra as I move this particular deck into UI flows or RPA, right? And then you can apply intelligent models, like you can automate the legacy software, and UI flow will go through how we can achieve that. And you can build AI models. Let's wait for Ruhi's session to get there. End-to-end automation. There is an example of an end-to-end automation scenario in the demo we are going to take today, and we'll see what time savings it can incur as well. Let's see how Power Automate works. There are hundreds of triggers. So basically you have the concept of triggers. You can share those flows like documents and templates. You have seamless integration to the other Microsoft ecosystem, and you have extensibility model with other third-party integration in terms of other applications. You have thousands of built-in templates, and that number is really increasing day by day. There's a data connectivity for 300 plus services. It is built on CDS, and CDS is really good in numbers. So I've heard through the day about the numbers CDS can handle. Well, when it was first iteration of CDS, I could have doubted it, but this is not anymore the first iteration of CDS. It is really scaling, and it is really a scalable platform to build your complete business ecosystem on. And yes, of course, AI. So there are some of the examples of the connectors. You can see connectors for Office 365, Twitter, Flutter, Act, right? So there are tons of Teams connector. In the examples, we will see tons of those things. These are example of templates. So let me take through one example. I want to save my Office 365 email attachment to directly into OneDrive for Business. The first example there, this one, right? So these kind of templates are being provided by not only Microsoft, there are some other companies also which have been creating those templates. And if I had a scenario like that, rather than even spending time to make that trigger and flow, you just pick this and configure it. That's it, right? So this is a ever-growing number, and that's really where the power of the Power Automate solution lies. It is in templates plus those connectors that are coming in, and the number is ever increasing. And how fast this is increasing? On an average, 15 to 20 connectors are being seen on a month-on-month or a month-and-a-half basis, right? That's a very aggressive speed. Now let's talk about robotic process automation. If you have any questions on the part that I talked about or anything innovative, I don't think there was anything innovative on the first part, which I talked about on Power Automate. Please share your queries. Jiva, if there are any queries till this point, let me be aware.
Yeah, there are three questions. So ideally,
Sure.
three questions. Yeah. So one is from Raj. How RPA is going to help for MSCRM professionals as future aspect?
So for the RPA question, Jiva, let's wait for, I will wait for completing RP, right? Because I have not even ventured into those slides, right? But
Perfect.
for
Yeah.
if there is any specific question with Power Automate, that's what I wanted to check.
Yeah. So there is one more. So
Mhm.
there is an I don't know if there's a question or suggestion from Mayur, or I mean, it's experience or question from Mayur. So he says we integrated Power Automate with Microsoft Teams to fetch reports from multiple systems using some commands lines. I think it's kind of his sharing his experience. And there is one question from Rafael. So this question is, it looks like an Azure Logic app. Any difference?
Okay. So I can definitely take that question, but again, uh, I'll believe Yash is going to take a session which will deep dive into this as well. I'll give a shorter answer to it. So consider everything as a wrapper on top of other thing, right? Even Azure Logic App is a wrapper on certain thing, right? Azure Function is a kind of wrapper to something. Similarly, internally, Power Automate does utilize a lot of frameworks. Exactly what it is, I cannot know, but yes, there is definitely Azure at play internally. Everybody is aware about that. So consider it a wrapper, but such a wrapper that is able to give me a click and configure experience, right? And not going to need to code for everything. I hope that clarifies this particular question.
Yeah. So, and then one more question from Shailesh related to Power Automate. So, is Power Automate can be a real time as workflow, or they like the workflow in Dynamics 365, or it's like asynchronous?
It is well known. It is not run synchronously. It is pretty well known. So when I run the demo, we'll be pretty clear about that.
Perfect. There's one more question. Yeah, sorry, but that
Hmm.
is for the RPA. I think I hold it for you to complete the RPA. Okay, that's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jiva. Thank you, everybody. Like, I hope your questions with respect to Power Automate are taken care till this point, whatever we discussed. Next thing, let's talk about what is the need for a robotic process automation. Let's start from there. So, how many of you have worked with financial based ecosystem or a public sector organization which is running and using a age old system, and this applies equally? I spent good deal of my time in Europe, and there used to be an application which was built in 1980s, right, in one of the revenue departments of a country there. And the only way to basically move data is like I take some entries, no matter from an on-premise system or a cloud system, and then there are barriers, right? So just want to start a bit of interaction. Anybody remembers that scenario where, okay, I cannot do anything about this automation because why? Because there's no API and neither I can hit the database, neither I can expose it out in some way. How many times we have been in that scenario? Anybody can unmute themselves and share that experience. Okay. I believe I don't have takers on that, but yeah, I have been there multiple times in more than a decade-long journey where, okay, yeah.
Yeah, hi, yes, Dipesh. So I think there are some mainframe systems or age-old systems which do not provide any events as such if there is any update or something has been done on the data so that they can trigger such event.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm aware about banking systems in India as well. Let me take an Indian example as well to add to what you said. So there are tons of applications internally being used which were developed not definitely not post 2000s, right? They have been running good. They are really neat applications, but they are one of the example is loan management system. Typically, banks have their own internal either custom built or a open source built or something custom built application. Whatever capture you do of data, you have to go to that application and do some processing, get your account number or some other fields, whichever you want, and then back update the system. Since you don't have APIs and you have security compliance and other things, you are not able to automate it, right? So that's where robotic process automation, those are the scenarios where a robotic process automation really helps you. These are mundane daily tasks, rule-based tasks that are run daily, and there's a human time involved in this, right? So what you can do with this RPA is you can automate this legacy software without the need of actually getting them through any APIs. And it opens the world of automation to that segment of the application which we have never looked at, right? UI flows help you in automating those legacy apps. You can basically what you can do is you can allow for automation without any APIs or connectors. So I'm not going to utilize any connector when I demonstrate the UI flow. There is some application I have in my machine, and when I change screens, there might be a little flicker because I'll also have to change to one single screen so that it runs properly. But having said that, Power Automate helps me using this UI flows to get this into modern world. How I do get into the modern world? Because I can then trigger this UI flows using Power Automate. That means as soon as I'm able to trigger a UI flow from a Power Automate solution, all those connectors and all those templates that I talked about in my previous part of the deck makes sense, right? You can streamline how you work by recording your mouse clicks, your keyboard use, your data entry, and automate the replay of the steps to be included into more process automation. So typically a data entry operators, whatever data entry operators are doing in a call center, in a public sector department somewhere, in an enterprise organization, or in a financial organization setting, right? These are some examples. You record your task, you test and validate them, and then you can execute and play back that task. So that is really the use case of where UI flows helps us in automating the legacy apps. They also make the automation intuitive because recording this is very, very easy. So there are other tools out there like UiPath, and you do need a degree of skill set. I cannot really call them a low code, no code approach on trying to automate. Um, those are the ones where you need a lot of skills to be earned or learned before you are able to actually do the recording and even configure things around. But we can clearly see how easy Power Automate API and the user interface makes it for us. Now, repetitive tasks can be automated by the workers itself, and they can start making changes just like what they have been able to utilize with Power Automate. The same design principles product groups have put forward into the configuration of a UI flow as well. Bridging automation between old and new. You can have old apps without API, you can have modern systems with APIs, and then you can bridge the gap using Power Automate. There are two kinds of experiences that you have. Now, I'm not going to, before I discuss this, I'm not going to be the best person to answer anything on licensing. There are a lot of, I believe there will be somebody from Microsoft also on this call, and earlier in the day, Prakash sir did share their details, right? So they are the right people to talk about licensing. What I'm going to talk about are the types from a techno-functional perspective and use case perspective. So pardon me if I'm not taking up anything on the licensing bit. But there are two kinds of process automation that you can achieve. One is attended and then unattended. What is the overview of a attended RPA or a UI flow? You can drive efficiencies and automate your manual individual task across desktop and web, but somebody has to attend to it. That means the machine has to be running. Somebody has to not do anything while the machine is running in. But if your job is high volume end, right? Let's say you have few hundred to process, few thousand to process. You want to accelerate this automation on higher volume and tedious tasks without lifting a finger, because you cannot stop your current use case or current usage just for the automation to run on your machine, right? In those cases, you can go for the unattended experiences. Attended is a personal automation experience. Unattended is an enterprise automation grade experience. Scenario for attended might be on-demand task automation. Scenario for unattended might be company processes at scale, right? Which you don't want individual human time to be spent on. What can be a target audience? If I'm a citizen developer, that's a term right from Satya Nadella to everybody you will see. Power Platform is all about citizen developers. If I'm a citizen developer or that power user in my business unit, my company department, yes, I can go for the attended personal automation one. In the unattended one is where you will get an automation specialist in a center of excellence or some department within IT or maybe an expert organization which is dedicated to doing that RPA. A lot of people are worried with Power Platform as well as Power Automate that it is going to cause a lot of disruption to our day-to-day jobs, right? Why people will need techno-functional skill set. One example right here. If you want to really scale RPA to an unattended audience, which makes sense, right? you will need an automation specialist, right? To be consulting and maintaining it, suggesting you best practices and performance-centric approaches of doing it. So don't be worried whether you are the technical person or a functional person, there's always going to be something for us to be doing going forward as well. The requirement on an attended one is the user is signed in on their device and human initiated, right? Somebody has to be there. And unattended is jobs on dedicated machines, virtual machines, robots that do the work, right? Any place where you need that scale, you can go for the unattended one. Of course, there are pricing impacts on both experiences. That's where I said I'm not going into licensing. So how does a UI flow look like? So this is a great example screen for how a UI flow looks like. You basically start your UI flow and then you run recording. You launch a recorder, right? The second step on the second screen you see here is somebody's launching a recorder. There is some insert text input. So some text input has been put up here, right? And that has been recorded. So there is a launch to Microsoft Access in the first step. Then there are replay of certain keystrokes. And then there's certain text input being inserted. And on the other side, you can see how the recorder works. Like this is pretty simple. The idea of this design has been to keep it really simple, where you can configure inputs as well as outputs. We'll talk about them. What is an input? What is an output once we go through an example. And then you can trigger this, right? And every time you run it, this set of experiences will be triggered. Then you can capture a certain degree of output and use it for processing elsewhere. Seeing RPA in action, let's talk about the business problem at hand before we see RPA in action. We have Tom, he's a backend operator in D365 Champs Corp. Each end of the day, he has to synchronize the new applications that are submitted on a web application. So as the systems have scaled, there is an application which is available in the web application format. And this has to be taken to a backend application, which is a legacy application, basically. Thereafter, he has to get those account numbers generated and updated back into the web application. Every day, this takes a lot of manual effort for Tom to complete and is a repetitive daily process. So this is something which is running daily on daily basis. And without the account numbers being updated, the business process in the web application cannot continue. Traditional problem in many places where the legacy applications without the ask of APIs or without some database or some kind of interface to integrate exist, right? Now, how does the UI flow solution solve that problem? So demo scenario, the solution for our legacy app data migration flow. In this case, I'm triggering the Power Automate manually. And the choice of my web application, I've kept a CDS application, which I'm just going to flicker on the screen and share very quickly. But this web application can be something else as well. It can be SharePoint, it can be something else sitting in the cloud. It can even be a legacy application on a desktop client. Just for my example, I've taken application as a CDS or a common data service web application. The next step is all the applicants will be processed. It will till how long I'll be processed till all the applicants are basically read. Then there is an automation that is going to run in the legacy app using RPA UI flow. It will automatically get the account number from this legacy application and synchronize this data back to the web application. Not only that, I will be notifying my Teams channel for account processing every time the account number has been processed and updated. And same thing will be back updated into the model-driven user interface as well. So that's the kind of scenario. Let me take you through the screen. Just give me a second while I change my screens around. So how does my app looks like? So before I go for automation, this is a very simple app that is based on a desktop application. What it does, this is the backend legacy application. Every time that I want to enter certain information, so let's say I want to insert some information. So I'm just going in and getting that information, give some mobile number, email, and then I'm going and submitting a processing, right? So once the processing is done, there's always an account number being created, right? So that's how this particular legacy application runs. How does my existing mobile or sorry, my existing web application looks like? Let's quickly see that as well. So this is my model driven app, and sorry Prashant, I took the liberty of taking your applicant example as well, but I hope that's okay. So there are two applicants here. One is me and another is Prashant. Account numbers have not been processed. You can see clearly on this user interface. And then I have Teams channel open over here. This is my general area for the account processing channel, which I've kept open as well. Then I do have one manually triggered Power Automate that I'm going to trigger, and in turn that is going to trigger my UI flow in an iterative way. Let me just flicker back to the screen as well. So if I go to my UI flow screen, you can see that a UI flows power has been available here. I will go into the detail of the recording as well, how to record and what are the precursors before you're able to achieve that. But let's first see this in action, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to change the screen around because I will not be able to project it in a non-extended mode. Let me just change the screen resolution for myself really quick. Jiva, please make me aware if my screen sharing has changed or something is not working as expected.
We are seeing your teams now.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we are in
So
yeah.
So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to run this particular flow from here. So if I click here, run, this is a manually triggered one, but very well you can trigger it from elsewhere as well. Let me just minimize this part of the screen. Thank God it's gone. Now there are some connections and actions that are already there. So let me click on review. So how many connections I'm using on this particular example? I'm using a CDS connection. I'm using a UI flow connection, and I'm also using a Microsoft Teams connection. Going back, I'll just trigger the flow, and now I'm not touching the screen. Okay. So we saw the data that existed on the applicant entity. I've triggered this flow. I'm not touching the screen. It will take certain time to trigger. I have taken and given pauses in places so that it runs with the effect and we can see clearly what's happening. So you can clearly see on the screen now that our desktop application has just been launched, and the delays that you're seeing are intentional delays that I've given. It will take almost close. Yeah.
You might have to share your entire desktop because okay, it's working now.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, I've given delays to that so that we can clearly see what's going on. And I'm not typing. You're not hearing a typing sound, right? Then it is going to submit it for processing. The generated account number is captured. Application is closed automatically. That goes for the first applicant record. I'm still waiting because it is again going to re-trigger it for my second applicant record, which is for Prashant. So taking your feedback, Prashant, the delays are caused by me, right? So that it runs and we can clearly see how it is running. Okay.
I wasn't sure if you're sharing the entire desktop because we didn't initially see the bank application.
Yeah. So this is getting automated on its own. Whatever information you had from that particular model-driven app has already been captured. It has taken in. Now, let me go to my details. So let me click on done and see what happened to my run here. So it's still running. I will have to wait for it to be finished, of course. So this succeeded and it took 2 minutes. I could have very well done a lot more number of records in that time. Let me first see what happened with the applicant's screen here. So if I refresh this, the account numbers have been back updated from whatever you saw on the screen, right? That's taken care. And then if I go on my Teams channel, my account number processed and for whom it was processed is auto posted here as well, right? So we were able to see that the information from different things, including my legacy application, what was captured, is able to be integrated here. So that's what it achieved. So now let's see what actually happened in going ahead and making this particular flow, right? So let me go into the details of how this one was done. So first of all, I chose a type for manually triggering my flow, and then I went for list of all my records. Then there's a loop going on here and where I'm triggering a UI flow. If you see here, I have some input parameters that I have been able to pass to, or input that I have been able to pass to my UI flow. Then I am able to get an output out of my UI flow, which was run from the last step. I've been able to update that in and then take the same and then use the Teams integrated trigger action to actually update. Okay, here is the account number and from who it is processed. So I'm capturing information from multiple sources here, right? That's what went into actually building this one. Now, what about my UI flow? So let's quickly see what happened and how the UI flow was actually built. If I click on edit, you can see that first step is always to set up an inputs and then you have to give some sample and a description. So in this case, I gave 4 as inputs, and there are certain samples that I've put in. The next step is to run the bank application script. And if you see and expand this, how I was able to achieve this is it knows from where it has to launch the application. It has captured that path on my machine. What I have been doing, left clicking and then inserting some text input. What I've done with this text input is the value has been dynamically selected from the last one. That's the input parameter. Then the last parameter of this particular example is the area that gives the account number. Now this can be multiple areas within a particular screen as well. Last step is to close the application. What I can do then is I can just test it directly. So I can very well do it like test now. If I trigger the test now, whatever information I have on capture here is going to be automatically triggered as well. So whenever you are done with recording and then testing your UI flow, that is step 1. You configure your UI flow. And then this is the flow that I have triggered from another Power Automate flow, a simple flow, which is triggering the UI flow and also looping through all my records and then back updating the account number that is generated, right? So you can see clearly that this is running it is processing, as well as my account number is done and the application got closed as well. Now, if I go into this run, it took a total of 31 seconds and you can clearly see the output here, right? The screenshot is under capture as well. How did I go and actually record the step? What you need to do, you have a step type called as recorder, right? Before you are able to get to this stage, recorder and trigger a record app step. That's what you need to do before you can configure certain thing like this. And then you need to click on launch recorder. Once I click on launch recorder, it is going to launch recorder IDE with options to record, set inputs, outputs. So I can get this right. So I can say record and start recording. Now, if I had some manual inputs to be given, I can set them here. If I had some outputs from a particular part of the screen, after my processing is done, I can just select that area and say get output, and then capture a variable for that output capture, for that output particularly. I am not going and doing this right now because this can take certain amount of time, but I hope the idea is clear. If you need further details, feel free to reach me out later and learn it via the recording that will be shared as well. But that's exactly how you are able to start a recorder. So I'm just going to close this particular window. Now let's talk about even to get to this stage, and there are certain steps that you require to set up UI flow on your device. I'm taking the liberty of utilizing Microsoft Docs, excellent place to do your prerequisites. You need certain prerequisites, like you need a paid or trial Power Automate plan, you need an account with administrative privileges, you need a device that runs either of this operating systems, you need a browser like Microsoft Edge with version 80 or later, you need a Chrome browser. Certain limitations are listed as well, but I would want to focus more on the steps that are required. You will need to install a UI Flow installer first. You will need to agree to certain terms and conditions. You will need to activate a UI Flow browser extension then after you are done. You need a Selenium based IDE to automate the web application and install an on-premise gateway. So in my machine, there's an on-premise gateway. Once you have done all those steps, this does take time, but this is a one-time activity, right? Once you've done all those steps, you will need to come to your connections and set up a connection. So let me go into my connections area real quick. So here I have connections. So once everything was set up, you will need to create what is a UI flow kind of a connection, right? So I created this where I gave domain name, password, and I can select the gateway, right? So you can have multiple gateways literally running on your machine. And similarly, I had created connections for other things. Once you have all this set up, this does take, let's say, 1 to 2 hours if everything goes well, and can take up to 3 to 4 hours if something on your machine, on your network, some privilege issue, something like that, but it's a one-time activity. After that, you, for recording and doing the rest of the stuff, it will not take as much, right? So that's kind of where you get to, and then once you've done all this configuration, you can start creating your UI flow. From where you just go to your flow screen, click on UI flows, and click on new. Now you have two experiences here. What are those two experiences? You can either go for a desktop app based. So if you're really capturing a desktop app, a legacy app like I did, you have to utilize this one. If you're going for a web based, you can use the web app version, right? So the experience depends on what you want to choose. I'm taking the example of a desktop app. You can start giving a name. So I'll call it UI flows power, and then move on next. And here is where you get back to the same screen, right? So that's your starting point. I hope this gave you a quick idea of how this can be utilized. I am leaving Jiva, if there are any queries, I have certain time, I hope, to take them up.
Yes, Deepesh, there are a few questions, and if you're done with the demo, we can start with the questions.
Yeah, I'm done with the demo. I'm just changing the screen around. So please let me know what are your queries. I will be happy to take it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a moment. Yeah, so we have a question from Raj, which I told earlier. So how RPA is going to help full for MSCRM professionals in future?
So I'll I will need to know more than that, like how specifically for a MS CRM professional, I need to get to a more nitty-gritty of this question, right? Like in what sense? Yeah.
I think one of the example would be like, as you mentioned, like automations, I mean, continuous integrations or one-time integration, migrations, all these things could be definitely helpful for MSC and professional. At least it helps me, and definitely it's going to be helpful
Right.
for
So if the question is more with respect to scenario, because I thought it can be to do with skill sets or to do with, certain people feel challenged in terms of what's going to happen to us as a MSCRM professional, right? So that's why I asked that question. But if it is a use case based or scenario based, right? Like I remember a banking application that I built in 2017 when all this didn't exist. There was a backend uh, loan management system or something else, what the bank used to call it, which was not having, you could not expose the API, I cannot expose the on-prem in any way, I cannot go and do any other thing, and they need a mobility app along with it, right? So they are trying to submit loan management applications from all over in the field, which will go somewhere, but from there, if the end agent or the RM or the has to see, by RM I mean the actual person who is going out in the field and see what is the account number process for this guy. They can't, right? Because the backend application, somebody will sit few times in the day, process it, then back update, and might do it on a nightly basis. So as a MS CRM professional, I was not able to provide a very good solution to them, right? I was able to not solve that problem in real time. With this, I can solve the same problem with real time, right? May you have a legacy app. Another example where I saw a good use case of utilization. Many of the companies keep getting POs, right? Purchase orders at all times, and they want to update this, right? So you can pick. I've seen scenarios where people have demonstrated the ability, and you can search about it. You can just literally Google about, pick all those purchase orders and directly insert and update into the entry system wherever you have an entry system, right? The numbers. So this kind of processing scenarios, which traditionally we were not able to solve, we are able to solve with the advent of UA flows.
Thank you, Dipesh. And there are a few more questions. The next one would be from Chetan. Is Power Automate faster than RPA tools like UiPath and automation and any other things?
So this only became GA on April 2 of 2020, right? It is less than a month old right now. As any technology evolves, I need to give it that time. UiPath, we all know how long it has been around for, right? So I will not challenge it today. Give it a 6 months to a year's time, and given the thing which differentiates this from UiPath, it is intuitive. It is meant for the low code, no code audience, right? And it has the Power Automate ecosystem, the broader Microsoft ecosystem, which it can integrate to very easily, right? So in the entire example, I didn't cause any technical reason or any technical consultants requirement, right? Like a person with technical skill to come in. With UiPath, more often than not, you need those skill sets. Right? And at this stage, I cannot compare a car that is just launched today against a car that has been launched for a few years already, right? To shorten the answer.
Thanks, Dipesh. And the next question is from Panchal Dolly. So, will it be helpful if? Okay, sorry, can we integrate our ASP.NET form, let's see exe file, and do our action? Basically, running a Windows application using a Power Automate or UI Flow.
I just ran a Windows application, so.
Yeah, so kind of integration she's talking about. I think that's what
hybrid experiences. So if you have to do hybrid experiences, you have to do both web and desktop, right? If that's your idea. Are we talking about hybrid experiences that I have a scenario where I have to automate web as well as a desktop application in the same scenario?
Panchal, if you want to ask more, probably you can unmute and ask right now. If not, we can go for the next one. Okay, so this is one from Nilanka Shekhar.
Just give me a second, Jiva. Still, I would like to clarify that one. Let's assume it meant hybrid experiences of running both. What you will need to do, you'll need to run two recorder scenarios, right? Do your desktop part in one, do your web part in another one, right? You cannot do both in tandem. Those experiences do not create good outputs, right? That's the way to summarize it for now. But changes are coming. That's how much I can say at this moment. Yeah, Gio, I'm done. You can please help with the next question as well.
Sweet, thanks. And the next one is from Nilanka Shekhar. How to set up UI Flow to use in Power Apps? Does it require any installation like Selenium, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll just reshare that. I'll ping it afterwards, right? But I just shared the entire Microsoft Docs link here on the screen, where you need a list of, you not only need to do one, you need to do few number of steps before you're able to set up a UI Flow running for the first time. It can take anywhere between 2 to 4 hours in my experience on your machine to run it. And I can tell you before GA on April 2, this experience used to be not linear in terms of you might get inconsistent results, but ever after GA, this is fully supported. And after general availability, you can even raise a ticket if there is a challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Dipesh. And the next one is, can we use this in automation testing? And how does RPA has an upper hand when we compare with Selenium UI automation?
I think this is a wrong comparison if you ask my opinion, right? This is nowhere meant to be a testing framework. Selenium is completely a UI testing framework.
Mm-hmm. So how does one go ahead and create a script to connect to an external app? Is there a connector readily available? This is for Power Automate.
So for Power Automate, we have 300 plus connectors, right? So just one example which I took during the recorder, I triggered a connector and the option from a particular type. You have connected to Teams, you have connected to Office 365, Azure, other third-party apps, 320 as such, right? Including SAP, all the major enterprise grade products. You can build custom ones as well, right? Nothing stops you from building. There is a SDK support for building custom connectors. If you're talking on-premise, you have gateways.
Okay, thanks, Dipesh. And the last one is, can UI flows be used for data validation in Excel?
Okay, so one of the scenario I just happened to demonstrate for a Middle Eastern customer, and that's an insurance agency basically in the Middle East, was that they wanted the credit reconciliation process, right? Where you have a lot of you have a lot of accounting system statements, and they have the credit card statements, and they wanted to separate out the cash statements and also reconcile, right? Which is based on Excel. And yes, it was able to do that. Was everything been done in UI flows? No. There are certain things you cannot try to pick each cell in the UI flow. It might not work out well, and it might not be efficient as well. So you have to use the combination of Power Automate where required, and wherever you can automate using the UI flow step, you utilize the UI flow in between.
Thanks, Dipesh. So the last one is that I'm not sure whether this is relevant to this. So how this is different from RSAT in terms of F&O?
I'm not at all aware about that term. I think we do have a lot of finance and operation people attending as well, who will have more deep dive expertise and knowledge on what RSAT is first. If I can know that, then I might be able to take on this question as well.
No worries. So I think Manas, you can join the Kaisala WhatsApp group, Kaisala group for CHAMS or LinkedIn, and you can drop the queries there. Definitely, there are F&O experts has the patient and who can help you with that. We have F&O experts like Kasoon and other people here. Okay, thanks, Dipesh. Thank you for your wonderful session. It was very interactive and very helpful, and we all learned a lot from that. And I was right. There are 4 books. You lied to me. You said 3 books.
Thank you, everybody. This will be available later for consumption, of course. I just have shared the link for a long time, so I'm not continuing to share that. I just want to end it by saying Power 365 as usual, guys.
Thanks, Dipesh. Guys, stay tuned. There is a next session coming from Ruhi Sheikh on AI Builder for quick automation. So before starting with a Ruhi session, I would just like to flash the feedback forms QR code for Dipesh session. Kindly let